Welcome to this video where we are going to discuss the third name that we find in Scripture for God as He presents Himself to His people. And today we are going to talk about El Roi, and that means the God who sees. We find this name presented in the 16th chapter of Genesis. And Chellee, I think it's so interesting because one of the things that I find helpful to remember as I read through the Scriptures and I think about the names of God and how they're presented is that God is all of the things that He presents Himself to be. And as you see Him present a new name to a character or insert it in a situation, you still see hints of the other characteristics of God and the names that He portrays. And one thing that I find so interesting in the story of Hagar, which there are a lot, and we're going to talk about several of those today, but one of the things that I find so interesting is we spent all that time talking about Yahweh and His longing for a relationship with us. And as we look at this situation and where He interacts with Hagar, we see glimpses of Yahweh all the way throughout that. And I thought that was so interesting. Any thoughts on that?
I think it is interesting that no matter what portion you look at, one characteristic of God, you try to concentrate on one characteristic. You can't really look at one without looking at all of them to get a better understanding of who God is.
Absolutely. I like too that we see through the portrayal of this story in Hagar that God is no respecter of persons. I mean, here He is, and he sought out a slave girl who was in a desolate situation. And it's so funny to read through that and see how God in His infinite knowledge knew exactly the situation that Hagar had found herself in. He knew why she was running away, and yet He meets her in her place of need and He asks her those important questions anyway. And that's just proof to me that even though He knew, He wants to do the conversing and the talking, and He gave her an opportunity to share her heart and her story, and He wants to do that so many times for us as well, and we just forget.
And that goes back to the relationship, Him wanting to have a relationship with us.
Absolutely. Today I want to zero in on the instructions that God gave Hagar whenever we find her in the situation, because I think that they're going to speak volumes for us in the situations that we are in life. I know that so many times people get this mentality of, I'll serve God, and we don't even realize that we're doing it, but we kind of get this mentality of, I'll serve God, and then I'll serve Him because this will happen, and He's going to provide for me in this area, and if I just devote my life to Him, then I know He's going to take care. And those are all true, but that's not really, well, that goes back to covenant relationship as well. Go ahead and say what you were going to say, because I knew you were.
I was just going to say that we kind of feel like if we do all of these things, we obey His commandments, then it's almost like we feel like He owes us. And that's not it at all. I mean, obviously He owes us nothing because He's already laid down His life for us. So we owe Him everything. But we do kind of get that mentality of, well, if I do this, then God will do this. Absolutely. And we try to use it as a manipulation, and that's not what it is all about.
And I think a lot of times we're doing it and we don't even realize that we do it. And it's one of those things where when it came to my attention, I was studying something out, and this was just a small portion of what I was studying, and then I was like, Lord, do I do that? And I began to think about it, and as I allowed Him to point out those situations in my life, I was really surprised that I do. And then I was like, Lord, help me to recognize when I'm using that kind of mentality, and help me correct it, because it's wrong.
So many times in prayer, we'll even ask God, well, God, I've done this, I've done that. Why aren't you taking care of this situation? Or why haven't you changed this situation? Or even praying, God change the situation, or God change this person. We always want Him to kind of rescue us or try to change people around us, and that's not, obviously that's not the point.
Right, and Hagar is a perfect example of that, because we would expect, and I know that reading through it in my own human reasoning, I'm expecting God to swoop down beside her on the road and minister to her needs and then be like, okay, I've got this, I've got your back, I'm going to take care of this. And instead, what he says to her,
right back.
Right. So tell us, what does he say to her?
He actually tells her to go right back to Sarah, because this is actually the first time he sends her back and says, you know what, you ran away and you need to go right back and you need to submit yourself to Sarah as your mistress. And God tells her to go right back into the same situation that she was in that was so desperate. And so it's not a matter of him removing her from that situation. It wasn't a matter of him actually changing Sarah's mind or creating, a good relationship there. Is a matter of God told Hagar, go back and remember your place in your situation.
That's a hard lesson for us sometimes to hear. I do like the fact that, and a lot of times if people don't know the Hebrew story or just the cultural ramifications that factor into this story, they might not realize that although he sent her back, he did give her hope. Right. Because he told her that her son Ishmael was going to be a great nation and that he was going to, succeed, and that in itself would have been something for Hagar to rest assured in and to have hope for, and know that because her son was going to live and be a great nation, have lots of sons of his own, that she would be well cared for even into her old age. And so although God said to her, you know what, you're going to have to go back and work through this situation, she also had promised that he was going to provide for her. He was going to do what he needed to make sure that everything was okay. Right. So basically, if we want to look at Hagar's story and liken it to our own, I guess we can draw the conclusion that God sees us where we are, and he sees us in order to intervene on our behalf. Right. But sometimes his interventions are not going to appear like we would hope that they would appear. And we need to remember that as well. I know the three Hebrew children, that story is so well known to most Christians. And we see in that situation that, again, God saw and he intervened and he provided, but he didn't do it probably in the manner that the Hebrew children might have been praying for. He could have miraculously made the fire go out no matter how much they turned up the furnace, or he could have had an angel of the Lord appear at the door. I mean, he could have done so many things to keep those children from being thrown in. Right. But they were still thrown in. Right. And it was just that God walked alongside them while they were in the furnace. And that's what he did with Hagar.
They actually had to go through the fire, and that's really where God gets the glory, is when you can stay in a situation and do what God has commanded you to do, obey what he's asked you to do, and then he gets the glory for it.
And in addition to getting the glory, it draws us closer to him, because we have to rely on him. If he were to rush in and rescue us and just plant us in another new, different environment where we didn't need to pray and rely and seek his face, then we really wouldn't grow in our relationship with him. Right. So again, back to relationship, and the fact that he longs for us to be in relationship with him. And sometimes these difficult circumstances drive us more toward him and that relationship. All right, well, thank you again very much for being with us and participating in this study. We hope that as you look at the story of Hagar, that you are able to draw encouragement and hope from her story, knowing that although you might be in a situation that is difficult or depressing or just makes you wonder what you're going to do next and how you're going to handle it, know that God sees you, he knows where you are, and he is there to intervene on your behalf, and he's going to equip you so that you can walk through that situation and he'll be glorified in your endurance of it.